Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Rise podcast. And I'm going to ask for the pronunciation of your last name. I'm here today with Eric. You say your last name for me.
Muldrow.
Muldrow. Eric Muldrow, former first responder, founder of Code Red Conversations. And I'm just going to get started with our conversation here because we got a lot to cover. There's a lot of issues going on in his country, the United States, my country, Canada, the world of policing, and we're going to get into it. So, first off, thank you for being on here. I'll tell you where I found you. I discovered you, a friend of mine pointed me to an interview you did with, I think, a Unity Church online. And it was
Yeah,
just
probably for the Center for Biblical Unity.
Center for Biblical Unity. That's it. And so I watched your interview on there. You were talking about just issues with how people view police situations, talking about your situation and your past history. And I
Yes.
thought, man, I want to talk to you on my podcast. I'm a former first responder, and you are as well. And there are different ways that people view policing, and we want to try to clear the air. So, thank you again for being on here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, first of all, just tell me kind of your history as a first responder, when you were working in that field, and when you got out, what you're doing now.
Yeah, great. Let me back up a little bit. I'll go into a little bit of my history, which will kind of help people better understand who I am and kind of my whole
Absolutely.
mindset in general. I graduated from high school in '88, immediately joined the Army. Shortly thereafter, did 4 years in the Army. After getting out of the Army, I was a combat medic in the Army. So shortly after getting out in '92, I immediately started working for me and my ex-wife. We moved to the state of Indiana, where she was from,
Okay.
which is like a whole another story. That's like a whole different world. That whole place. But I don't want to bash Indiana in case you have any listeners from Indiana. I'll be nice today.
Okay. Okay. I don't, but it's okay.
But so I started working for. I wanted to jump into law enforcement. I wanted to be a cop, but the city we were living in, there was slim pickings. So I had a cousin who worked for one of the state prisons, Westville Correctional Center.
Hmm.
So she was like, "Eric, there's some openings. We're definitely looking to hire. It might help you get your foot in the door for law enforcement, and as far as being police work." So I said, "Hey, why not?" And I started working at Westville Correctional Center, and it was a maximum security prison at the time. And man, I tell you what, that was a whole different world. And because we were 40 miles outside of Gary, Indiana, which at that time was the murder capital of the United States, and 60 miles outside of Chicago. And we basically all know what the condition is in Chicago. I mean, it's weekly news. Every weekend you wonder how many people got gunned down in Chicago.
Yeah, I've heard pretty much.
So our clientele, for lack of a better term, was pretty unique. And I mean, we dealt with vice lords and Latin kings and gangster disciples and white supremacists, you name it. You had everything in there. And I learned a tremendous amount of knowledge and about how to deal with people on a whole different level, how to deal with the criminal element. Long story short, 3.5 years later, I moved to Las Vegas. And a year after moving here, doing some casino security work, in '96, I hired on with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and I began my work as a corrections officer in the local county jail, CLark County Detention Center. Did that for
So
10 years.
Clark County. Okay.
If that makes any sense, Yeah, you have the whole county, and then within that county, you have different cities. You have Henderson, you have Las Vegas, Nevada, various other cities within the region of Clark County. And so the police agency I worked for was covered the jurisdiction of Clark County. So I worked there initially as a corrections officer for 10 years. And then as time went on, over those years, I was a gang intelligence officer. I worked as a court officer where I transported inmates to and from court and different things I learned how to do. Crisis intervention team. That's where I developed those skills as far as how to deal with people with a mental health crisis.
Okay.
Then I got bored after a while. I said, man, I really wanted to do something else. So then I just transferred out to the patrol side of Las Vegas Metro Police and finished out my career from 2006 to 2014 as a patrol police officer. And I was a firearms instructor, defensive tactics instructor, active shooter response instructor.
Okay, you did it all.
I did a whole bunch of different things. I'm just the type that gets bored real easy. And then I have a passion for training, helping officers to improve. Because I would always think that we need to have a high standard in law enforcement. 70% when it comes to shooting, 75% to me is a joke. There should be a high standard in every field, every aspect that makes a police officer a police officer. The standard needs to be elevated so you get the cream of the crop, because we are public servants.
So you said 70% are what, passing their firearms?
Yes, passing your firearms and things like that. I always thought that was kind of silly, because you carry a gun with you 40 hours a week or however many hours a week you work. You need to be highly proficient. That was always my mentality.
I believe that too.
And so in 2014, I retired. I was thankful for a nice long career in law enforcement. But then as time went on, I just started noticing so much talk about policing and so much negative talk, and a lot of people speaking on the issues of police use of force and saying that this shooting was bad and that shooting was bad. And now there are some that were bad, and I call them out for being bad. But there are others where the average citizen just doesn't have the knowledge when it comes to police tactics and police response and situational awareness. So I just decided to start speaking out on these issues on a radio show called Aaron the Addisons that I highly recommend, by the way. They talk about various issues, and I was part of their local online chat, and I just commented on it. And then during the shooting in Dallas, where those 5 cops got killed a few years back, Dallas, Texas, I started speaking on. I was just really passionate. I think I almost stayed up all night talking about it the night the shooting took place. And then one of the hosts of the show asked me to come on their show and just kind of address these issues when it comes to police uses of force. And I was on there a good hour. And then that kind of springboarded me to start speaking more. So then I created Code Red Confrontations in 2018, where I try to travel around and speak at local schools and churches, and nationally I've had opportunities to speak. Matter of fact, this Friday I'm getting ready I'll be heading out to Chicago to speak.
Good place for you to be.
Yeah, to address these issues, man, because so many people, I think they're good-hearted folks, but there's a lot of people who just really don't understand all the nuances that are involved in a police decision. So I was trying to give you the Cliff Notes version. It was a little longer, man, but I just kind of wanted to give everyone a better understanding of who I am, what my background was, and what affords me the opportunity to be able to speak from a position of, what I would like to say, a position of confidence and position of knowledge on these topics.
Okay. And thank you for that. I mean, I love when the bio is live anyways, so I'm good with that. I think as much time as you need, explain it live as opposed to me just reading from a piece of paper.
Right.
Tell me more about, so you're speaking in Chicago this week. Who are you speaking for, and what's your goal of that presentation?
Yeah, there's a church that it's funny because he saw me on the same, I think it was the same show, the same podcast. It was All the Things with the Center for Biblical Unity with Monique and Kristen. They had me on, and he saw me, and it's really wild because I'm plugging all these different things, man. But there's a documentary called Paint the Wall Black. I'm not sure if you heard about it. There was a church. It's a long story, but the short version of it, there was a church in Chicago that met a lot of pushback from Black Lives Matter because they wouldn't, during the height of the George Floyd riots and protests, they wouldn't put on their box, and it was a restaurant that was attached to it. Some of the family members owned the restaurant, people that attended that church.
Yeah.
They wouldn't put the black box on their Instagram and Twitter page that
Oh,
everybody was
the blackout box that everybody did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they wouldn't do that because they came from a biblical perspective, and they didn't want to emphasize any ethnic group over any other ethnic group.
Okay.
They believe that all men are created in the image of God and have inherent value and worth, and they're equal in the sight of God and in the sight of man. And they refused to put up a black box, and then they received a whole lot of heat. And I mean, death threats and people threatening to burn their institution down. They lost everything. But it's funny, the pastor of that church saw my video, my interview, and he invited me to come out and speak to his congregation and me and a few other people. So they're having a conference over this weekend, and I was blessed with the opportunity to come out and speak.
Okay. And you're going to be obviously talking about not only your background, but things that we, I guess, maybe in general need to do to understand police officers better or what they have to deal with? Or are you approaching it from a perspective of being a black man dealing with these issues as well? What side are you approaching it from?
You know what? In my presentations, man, I always try to hit all sides of it because it encompasses who I am. Okay. You know, I've been a black man all my life, obviously. And hey, some people might question that with some of my perspectives on things, man. But that's another story.
Oh gosh.
But when it comes, and then on top of that, I've been in law enforcement for more than half my life in some capacity. So when I talk about these things, I acknowledge the issues when it comes down to how some things look, and even the unfortunate history, and even at times unfortunate present, as far as how sometimes people, black folks, are treated when it comes to coming in contact with the police. I don't shy away from the reality of bad cops. Never have, never will. Even when I was a cop, even when I was a CO, I was always that guy who pushed back against those who wanted to abuse their authority.
Yeah.
And so that kind of put me in a position where I was never the popular guy. And nowadays, where I say, hey, you know what? The world thinks that this shooting or this use of force was bad, but here's why I believe it wasn't bad. So I come at it from every side. I try to approach it as holistically and as balanced from as balanced a perspective as humanly possible, with the desire to not bring in too many biases, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you want to approach it neutrally so that
you
get people from all sides to listen to you. And so this is a podcast about resilience. I also have been a black man all my life. I speak and I speak to not only adults but high school students. And I'm going to throw some things out to you that have been presented, and then you tell me what your perspective is on it.
Sounds good.
What do you say to people who, I know that there's a lot of black officers that are getting heat right now, being called Uncle Toms, selling out for being, aligned with the man.
Right.
What do you say to those people? Because I'm sure you may have encountered that.
What do I say? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. What do you say? I guess, what do you say to both? What do you say to maybe officers who are like, man, you know what? I'm getting so much heat from my community. And then what do you say to the people who are giving that heat?
Right. I say to the officers that are getting the heat, you getting heat and pressure and pushback from the culture from way, shape or form is part of the what's the word I'm looking for? Comes with the territory.
Okay.
Being a cop.
Yeah.
There's no getting around that. I can recall times where I policed in some of the hood areas here in Vegas, and there was this one Mexican officer. He looked at me and he said, man, I don't know how you do it. Because every day, some of the black dudes in the area that I patrolled, there was a lot of drug crime, a lot of shooting, a lot of gang banging. They would give me the blues every single day. And he said to me, man, I don't know how you do it, man. These guys don't cut you any slack. The good thing for me was when I worked in the prison at a young age, I developed a thick skin because man, them dudes were like experts. They sit back, all they got time to do is sit back and watch you and try to poke holes and see where they can find a chink in your armor.
Okay.
So I got to a point to where I got used to it. I don't say it doesn't faze me. I hate it when somebody calls me that. But at the same time, I'm like, they can voice their opinion. They can believe what they want. I try to encourage other officers by saying this. If you know that you are trying to do the right thing, you are trying to police these communities and bring them up to the standard that they should be, get rid of the criminal element to the best of your ability, you got nothing to hang your head on for. Mm-hmm. You don't need to be feeling ashamed of that. I would have guys that I was just arrested and I took them to jail, and we're on the way to jail. They're slinging dope in their communities, selling them to kids, selling them to parents, destroying homes, destroying families, gang banging, shooting each other up for a little bit of a turf to sling your dope. And you're going to look at me, a police officer who's trying to keep an area clean and trying to make it safe for everybody. And you're going to look at me and you're going to try to criticize me and talk down to me and say that I'm selling out. I said, if anybody's a sellout, it's you. It ain't me. Mm. And every time I said that, man, it would shut them down because they were forced. I tried to force them to look at themselves in the mirror. What is your lifestyle doing to the Black community that you profess to be all about? Like so many of them were trying to be all pro-Black, but I'm like, everything that you do to make money, you're taking advantage of Black folks. So you're not in a position to sit up there and look down at me. So I say that to encourage those brothers and sisters who are out there who are Black, who are being challenged by whoever it is, whether it's the people in those neighborhoods or whether it's some knucklehead online on social media who thinks they know everything about policing and all that nonsense that goes along with that, or who's just having questions about whether they're doing the right thing. Man, know that you're doing the right thing. If you see a bad coming from the law enforcement side, if you see a cop taking advantage of someone abusing their power, speak up on it. Mm-hmm. Speak up. Don't sit back and be quiet about it. Speak up on it, because those cops are the ones that make it bad for everyone else. Do your part and play a role in like I said, cleaning up policing, because every industry needs to be cleaned up. But hold your head up high, police righteously, do your job every day to the best of your ability, keep your skills as sharpened as possible, and man, you got nothing to be ashamed of.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. And I love the fact that, you say, keep your skills up, keep your pride in what you do as well. And when it comes to people putting their opinions in, and I know where you're going to go with this, but giving their opinions on the latest police shooting or the latest thing they see, the 30-second soundbite. What do you say to them to make sure that you don't sound like, hey, I'm a police officer, I'm just defending police officers because I used to be one? Because you might get that, and because I know I've gotten that. When I defend police officers, they say, oh yeah, it's just because you're part of that culture. How do you neutrally answer that, saying, hey, listen, maybe there's more to it than you're seeing on the news?
Yeah, I think that there is that danger of saying, hey, a cop defending a cop, because I got plenty of friends that no matter what a police officer does, former cops, just some people that are just so pro-police that they refuse to question anything a police officer does, which I think is utterly insane. And then you have other people who are on the extreme, who anything a cop does, they have to criticize. And what I do is I first of all, I tell them, check out my YouTube channel. Go to Code Red Conversations on YouTube. Watch some of my videos. Pull up videos where police officers have been involved in shootings. You will probably see the fairest assessment that I've come across. And of course, I'm going to be a little biased because I'm talking about my work. But I honestly believe I give one of the fairest assessments on police uses of force. If I see a cop who abuses his power, shoots someone when I think that he had multiple opportunities to do, or he should have used a different tactic or had many options, many force options in front of him, and he went through the most extreme. I will call that out in a heartbeat. No shame in my game. I've lost followers as a result of that, and I'm sure I will. I'm sure I've lost followers on the other side. It's just the name of the game, because some people will always argue, they'll always have a perspective. But my mindset is just simple as this. My track record when it comes to evaluating a police use of force is pretty clear. If you check out my YouTube channel, check me out on Instagram.
And I've done that, and I will put show notes in because I like your videos and I like the way you break down um, break down police calls. You and Brandon Tatum, I follow you both, and I was and like, okay, I like the way you actually break it down from a neutral standpoint, right?
Right. And you know what? And even different times where I've disagreed with, I like listening to Brandon Tatum on his content, especially when he's talking about policing. And there are times where I disagree with him. I'm like, nah, man, that was bad. And here's why I think it was bad.
Yeah.
And and that's the thing about policing, is that there's so much gray. A lot of people want to make it, and you know this, a lot of people want to make it out to be black and white. He should have done this, or he shouldn't have done this. But sometimes there are many options within that. And it's all a matter of perspective. There's so many things that are involved in the decision making process. Me as a cop, I'm 6'2", about 235. I work out. I'm pretty physically fit. I have a pretty good background when it comes to like martial arts and shooting and things like that. I'm confident when it comes to my skills. Trained with local SWAT. I wasn't on the SWAT team, but I had extensive training with our local SWAT team, an Army veteran. There's some things where I may not use deadly force, but you get a female officer who's 5'2", weighing $115, and we're in the same exact situation. Now that might be something where she's like, no, I'm using deadly force because this girl might be able to kill me. And it's a matter of perspective. And I try to just help people understand that there's so many nuances. There's so much gray in law enforcement use of force decision, or a decision to use force. And I just try to help people better understand that.
And along that line, so I know that I'm Canadian. I was trained with the RCMP, Canada's police force, and what we had was what we call an IM, Incident Management Intervention Model. All it is basically is we were trained that if we see a certain behavior, this is our range of options that we can do for that behavior, right? So cooperative, you talk; non-cooperative, you have, hand-to-hand. If you go into combative, you can go to baton or taser, and then there's force, death or grievous bodily harm. And what I try to explain to people is that, listen, when we go to a call, we're evaluating behaviors. Most of us, like you said, there's bad apples in every profession, but the ones that are good and that follow the training, we follow that procedural, process, if you will, to determine what level of force we're going to use. And that's how we evaluate when we go to a call. So
absolutely.
Let me know how training is where you trained, and if it follows a similar pattern. How do you get that across to people so that they know, hey, it's not personal, it's our training?
Yeah, what we have here in the States, I think pretty much universally, most agencies I've come across, you have some form of a use of force continuum, is what we call it. You have the officer's presence, then you have the officer's verbal command or order, then you have, if the suspect isn't compliant to that, then you have him going hands-on, and so on and so on, depending on the suspect's actions, typically, or I think I try to tell people over and over again that the vast majority of the time when people come in contact with a police officer and force is used, it's primarily because of the actions of the suspect or the citizen, because I know not everybody may be a suspect initially.
Yeah.
It's primarily because of the actions of the individual. A officer doesn't have to chase anybody if they don't run. Typically speaking, an officer doesn't have to shoot someone unless they pose. And this is in the vast majority. I'm not going to give a percentage, but in the vast majority of situations where a police officer has to use deadly force, it's because the suspect poses a threat, or there's a potential for a deadly force encounter, whether it will be against the officer or against a citizen. And that's their job. So I really just try to get people to better understand that, man, most of what we see today that makes the media headlines, man, if that individual had just made some better decisions at that moment, that officer wouldn't have had to escalate the force to the point that he did. And that's almost universally the case. In the vast majority of major incidents, shootings, everywhere from George Floyd, Jacob Blake, Rayshard Brooks, Michael Brown, Stephen Clark, you name them, had those individuals made different decisions and chose to comply with the officer, every one of them, 9 times out of 10, they'd be alive today. 9 times out of 10, they'd be alive today.
I love that you said that. And here's why I love that you said that, because you echo what most people don't have the courage to say. And they think it, but they don't want to say it. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, or if you disagree, but a lot of white people are afraid to say it because they're afraid of being called racist.
Oh, absolutely.
Police officers are afraid to say it because they're afraid of being called biased. And black people are afraid to say it because then you're not on the Black Lives Matter side. You're an Uncle
Then you're Uncle Tom. Yeah, right.
Then you're an Uncle Tom. So it's like nobody can, I say nobody likes to blame the dead. And
true.
That was my case. Just a brief history of my case. I used to be a police officer. I got called to an airport. Man was destroying property in an airport. When we got there, we tried to talk to him off use of force continuum. He went from non-cooperative to combative. I used a taser on him. He died of heart failure after we arrested him.
Wow.
It was in a public airport, videotaped, video still on YouTube to this day. I testified as to what I did in a national inquiry, nationally televised. There was a videotape of the incident. I said, hey, this is what I did. Didn't mean for him to die. We did what we were trained to do. And a tragedy resulted. Lawyers picked apart what I said in my statement. And as you know, when you go to a call, you don't remember everything perfectly. They picked apart some of the things I said. They called it perjury. They said I lied on purpose. I got charged with perjury. I went to jail and I lost my career. That's my story, Eric, in a nutshell.
Wow.
So when I look back at, there was a book written about my case. I wrote my own book about my case as well. And when I look back at the case, one of the things that was mentioned in not only the book, but in the history is the gentleman that we had arrested was coming off of being addicted to cigarettes, being an alcoholic. He had a criminal record in his old country. Now I know later, I found out he was exhibiting what's called excited delirium. You probably know what that is.
Very familiar.
So, death proximal to restraint is almost guaranteed, no matter what way you restrain them. So there's all these things that came out after, but no one ever likes to talk about the fact that he had a criminal record, the fact that he may have been an architect in his own demise, partially. I get that. We all play parts in it, but nobody ever likes to talk about the part that the suspect or accused or whatever you want to call them played in their demise. And since no one likes to talk about it, I'm glad that you mentioned it. Okay, did we need to get to the point? Yes, Chauvin should not have had a knee on his neck, but
absolutely.
Could that have been prevented by something Floyd could have done earlier? That's the only question that we want to ask. We want to ask before Jacob Blake got shot. Was there something he could have done differently that most people would have done differently before he got shot? And those are the questions. How do you encourage people to look at those questions without getting defensive?
I think it's a matter of trying to set the tone for the conversation to the best of your ability. Okay. Man, I encourage anyone who follows me, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, I really just try to encourage people to be willing to go where the evidence lies, regardless of how it makes you feel, and to be willing to examine. I'm always telling my kids, I'm like, man, don't just assume something to be true just because I say it or just because anyone tells you that, a teacher or someone in a position of authority. Be willing to ask challenging questions so you get a full balanced understanding of everything that went down. The initial reaction to Jacob Blake, for instance, I remember the Milwaukee Bucks the basketball team walked off the court that day because the initial news information was that black man unarmed shot by the police. We heard that repeatedly. Mm-hmm. And they walked off the court, I remember. And everybody and the whole city went up in flames again. And so and then a few days later, we see a video, he's got a knife in his hand. And then it wasn't until months later, to where he admitted to having a knife during that whole process. And weeks and months later, where we found that he had a warrant out for his arrest. But the initial response was outrage, anger, frustration. All them police, they just want to gun down every black man that they see. Celebrities speaking up on it. The whole country, basically. I'm not sure how much it hit Canada. Maybe you can go into a little detail on that after I'm done here. But the whole, a big part of the United States went up in flames over a series of lies. Mm. That's my honest perspective, or half-truths, misinformation. So I tell people how many times, and I use those as an examples. I talk about the Jacob Blake response and when Stephen Clark and the information we found out about Stephen Clark, Michael Brown, after everything was said and done, you come to find out, and this is and I love pointing this out, this is the Barack Obama-led Department of Justice, mm-hmm. led by Eric Holder also, who went in there, very liberal, very much Democrats, people who espouse the the racial injustice mindset. But their agencies went in there and found that Michael Brown was the aggressor. Mm-hmm. His DNA was found on the officer. Was it Darren Wilson? Was that his name?
I don't remember the name. I remember the case and
Yeah, his DNA evidence was found on the officer's gun. Eyewitness testimony testified against that. But before all that information came out, what happened? Ferguson, Missouri went up in flames, riots all over the place, people questioning all police activities and actions to the point to where cops end up pulling back, and then the crime rate shoots through the roof. More black folks dead, the ones they profess to care so much about. A lot of these people who are these activists who are all about defunding the police, and that's a whole nother can of worms we can get into. But man, oh man, there's such, I just tell people, how many times are we going to get caught looking like a fool when all the facts come out later?
Yeah.
So why not initially just say, okay, wow, that looks crazy, but let me wait and see what happened before the video started, for one, and get all the information, get as much information as we can before you come to any conclusion. But we're not in the time where it's rational thinking. It's an agenda. There are people out there who have a specific agenda, who are trying to change the course of North America in general. They are being very successful. And a lot of people are getting caught up in the mix because, once again, too many people are afraid to speak out from a position where you might be going against the popular or the mainstream opinion.
And that's all you're asking. You're not asking people to believe you. You're asking people to suspend judgment. And that's all you're asking people.
That's it.
Just wait, okay? Initial responses, this looks bad. But let me just look up the facts. And to answer your question about Canada, we're basically your cousins, right? So yeah. we get the news. We don't get all the different pieces laid out. We just get the sensational version, Jacob Blake shot. That's pretty much it until you look into it. Thank God now we have the internet. We can go
Oh,
look up
yes.
police. We can go look up files, histories, full stories, those types of things. People don't seem to me to want to do that work, and they want to just find the information that backs up the viewpoint they've created.
Right.
So it's a matter of, okay, just rewinding and saying, let me look at things a little differently. Um, you mentioned that there's a lot of cities that go up in flames, and that's something that I want to get your opinion on.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that's the response, and what do we need to do to change that so that cities don't go up in flames after these things happen? What's the conversation that needs to happen so that we actually see some real change? Because, correct me if I'm wrong on my stats, but most black people are killed by other black people in the states,
Yeah,
and
unfortunately,
not
yeah.
by police officers. A very small percentage by police officers, but I don't see Black Lives Matter's protesters kind of talking about, hey, what are we doing to each other? Why is that
They
not
don't they don't talk about that because BLM admittedly are self-professed Marxist. There is a social agenda, political social agenda that's attached to the responses that we see. I've been just recently trying to study up on the details, the inner workings of Marxism and this whole critical race theory push. We're seeing how that's being expanded. Those things are so deeply tied. Marxism, socialism, critical theory, critical race theory. Those things are so deeply tied to each other because what do you always hear? Capitalism is racist. The criminal justice system is racist. The education system, everything is racist. And they tie it all to race and ethnicity because these are, unfortunately, I don't think Canada has nearly the ugly history that the United States does when it comes to race and things like that, with the long history of slavery that we had. And there's some people who will always pick that scab because they know it'll get an emotional response. And I'm not trying to minimize that ugly history by any stretch of the imagination. But if we honestly sit back and we try to and we observe and we watch the transformation that has taken place in this country over from its inception, from the early days, you will see a dramatic improvement and a dramatic change within our culture when it comes to ethnic issues, dealing with people who look different or think different or who even believe differently. You'll see a country that has went to war with itself in order to abolish this ugly trade of slavery. You'll see a country that has instilled laws and amended laws in order to improve relations between ethnic groups. You'll see a dramatic change, and just the mere fact that there aren't any laws, I can, and this is what really gets me is when it comes down to those people who are behind all these different groups, different mindsets and political agendas, is that they're not going to be, they can't be honest because, and they refuse to be honest because for me to sit back and try to say that things haven't changed in our country for Black folks in particular, to me, that's just a blatant lie. There were, in my lifetime, I dealt with racism as a young man in the 70s, growing up. I dealt with blatant being called the N-word on the school bus or just walking down the street, someone yelling it out, having my car spray painted, the N-word down on the side. I've dealt with that in my lifetime, being bullied simply because I'm a Black man. And you fast forward to now, when we talk about the 21st century, 2021 to be exact, man, things have radically changed. And I guess if you hold the standard that you're comparing things with is utopia, is perfection, of course, any nation will fall short. But these people act as if America is like the hub of evil. Like slavery never existed until America came around and they brought it into play.
Yeah.
And racism was never an issue until America brought it around. All these different things that they talk about, every country. It is part of the human condition, sadly.
Yeah.
People do ill amongst against each other. People have been enslaving people for thousands of years.
Their
It
own
still
people
goes
too,
on today.
right?
Say again.
Their own people. Like sometimes in some countries, the people enslave their own people.
Thank you.
I'm not
Thank
nearly
you.
as educated on it as you are, but I'm just starting to get into some of the history and reading up and looking at just videos by Thomas Sowell and some of these people that just
Absolutely.
really explain that slavery went on. I mean, you guys didn't. You guys aren't the first ones that had slavery in your country, not by a long shot. Canada has its own issues with Indigenous people. That's coming more lights being shed on it more
Right.
than ever now too. So there's a lot of ugliness in the world, and I like what you said about it being. If you compare it to a perfect society where there's no racism, there's always going to be racist doctors, police officers, lawyers,
No question.
every profession. But when you compare it to where we were and where you were even in your childhood, as you said, it's gotten better. What country can you have billionaires? Jay-Z, Tyler Perry. You can have you could have a black president. You could have a lot of things that aren't even unheard of. But yet you haven't. You know, just recently I saw that there was an Olympian who got a bronze medal who didn't want to respect the national anthem.
Mm-hmm.
Is she being oppressed? She's now competing for her country on a world stage and being allowed to freely do what she wants to do with her life. You know, I don't know all her history and what she's been through, but I think it's good to have that perspective to look back and say, hey, look where what my parents went through, what a lot of people went through years ago. How do we get through to people? I mean, what do you think about the diversity push that's going out there and every company wanting to do workshops? Is this going to change anything?
I think that what it will do is ultimately either people will just cave in and go with the flow because they don't want to rock the boat, or it'll cause a man. I honestly believe, and this is just Eric Muldrow's personal opinion, we're heading towards something really ugly unless a radical change takes place. But I think we're heading towards like a civil war. It seems to be because there's so much tension when it comes to the issue of skin color and social justice and free speech and gun rights and all these different things within our country, to the point now that if you had, for anyone who voted for Donald Trump, people were literally getting attacked. There's videos all on the internet for wearing a MAGA hat, make America great again. And then all the exaggerations of the things. Now I'm telling you, when Donald Trump when he was first run, I was such a massive critic of him. I was like, this dude is a joke. I don't know. I don't know who would want to vote for this guy. But then I saw how he was treated, and I don't mean to get too deeply political on your show, brother, but I saw how he was treated in the media. I shared this story with a lot of people. I was already leaning way more conservative over the years. As a black man in the United States, it's like you're born. I always tell people, get your birth certificate and you get your Democratic voter card when you come out. So all my life, I was advocated for democratic policies and things like that. But my radical shift came, first of all, when the Lord graciously saved me, first and foremost. But then as time went, and then also as far as the deep nuances of it, when I just started seeing how he was treated in the media when it comes to, and we're talking about the way Donald Trump was treated, when people were taking his words out of context and spinning them to make them sound worse than they really were, or just giving you sound bites of what was said, it really caused me to open my eyes and say, you know what? Not only are we dealing with people with different political perspectives, but we're also dealing with the media that is willing to go to any lengths to get you to believe a certain way. And unfortunately, that's where we are. And it is only becoming worse because now you have social media entities, Facebook, Twitter, Google, Microsoft, you name them. They lean a certain way politically, and they stifle to a large degree people who have any dissent to any large degree. If you have a stance on some of these issues that are deemed hateful by the far left, man, there's a good chance if you hold to any biblical view of marriage or a biblical view of sexuality, anything like that, you are automatically deemed a hater and you will get shut down. Things that 15 years ago would have been like, hey, you know what? You have your perspective, I have mine. We can agree to disagree. We can have a dialogue on that.
That sounds
Nowadays, you're
reasonable.
say again.
That sounds reasonable. That
Too
you
reasonable.
yeah.
And that's the big key, brother. Reason has left. Reason has left the conversation. It is all about agenda. It is all about emotion. And they tie things that they don't like to some of the greatest evils in history. That for all the rhetoric of Donald Trump, and he would irritate the mess out of me with some of the things that he said and his some of these unreasonable tweets at times. They tied him with Hitler. I'm like, really? Like, seriously? How many people have Donald Trump just, how many lives has he just wiped out?
Yeah.
Like how many laws has he established to try to, is he trying to take away your rights? How many rights is he trying to take away from you as an individual? How many laws has he established that affect Black people and Jews and religious folk? I said, look at this rationally. But the unfortunate thing is people tie in, they use emotional issues like the racist history of our country and various other things to fortify their argument. So you really can't, if you attack the argument or if you try to debunk the argument, they basically look at you're trying to attack everything that they are. Yes. So therefore, if I say, you know what, I don't think Donald Trump, I think he might have been racially insensitive in some of the things that he said, but I don't think this guy is some full-blown racist. I don't believe that, because just a couple of years ago, he was appearing on Diddy's video and hanging out with Snoop Dogg and all these other, and this guy's been in the public eye for decades. Now, all of a sudden, he's the biggest racist that we all see. Now we're supposed to hate him. I just started understanding the political push, and I just try to get people to think about things a little differently. I've had so many conversations with people. So many people ask me, how could you be not be a Democrat? How could you be against the Democratic Party? And I just sit back and we have a conversation. And in one-on-one conversation, I've convinced many people to, at the very least, to understand where I'm coming from, at the very least. But when we're on a social media and we're in front of 50 people, 100 people in one timeline or conversation, then they want to call names. But when we have a one-on-one conversation and I try to share with people my perspective, and this is why this is problematic, it's surprising how willing people are to listen and how they can really be persuaded to some degree. But I think within the Black community at times, I think there's some things that are just so deeply ingrained within our culture, in particularly here in the United States, that if you don't fall in line with this, then there must be something where you're trying to sell out and you're trying to tap dance and trying to please the white man over here. And they won't even, unfortunately, a lot of people don't even aren't willing to give, and it's not the majority. No, I can't say it's not the majority. I think, unfortunately, as far as a vocal majority, they look at you like there's something wrong, and there could be no rational reason for that. I don't know how many friends like stopped following me and blocked me and all that because of my political stance, because I take a hard and firm stance on these issues, even though I have a ton of friends that are in law enforcement. But once I start speaking out on some of these other controversial issues, a lot of people don't want to hear it. They just don't want to hear it. They just they cover their ears and they cover their eyes. They don't want to hear anything like that, anything that's contrary to the popular Black opinion here in the States.
And the sad thing is that the things continue the same way. And just to circle back to the policing issue, even if you didn't have another police officer shooting of a Black person, there would still be a lot of Black people dying in the States. What is the answer to that? Now, I have my own opinions on that. And I posted about, it goes back to the home and a full home and a father in the home. But what are your thoughts on if Eric was president, what do we really need to talk about?
Man, bro, how much time we got? My
Hmm.
goodness. I'll try to keep it short.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, I'll try. But man, I'm telling you, there's so many layers to that problem.
I know it's unfair to ask a question that.
No,
Yeah,
I'm
give me
good.
the answer.
I'm good because we can talk about the problems, but if we're not even trying to address the solution, or then we're spinning our wheels. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I think there's so many layers. I think one is this. I would say the main root, some of the main foundations of our issues are the secularization of our society, like becoming more and more of a godless society. I would say the sexual revolution, the things that have really hammered us as a I would say like as a Western civilization in
It's an
general.
open podcast, man. You can say whatever you want, man. There's no censorship here, man. This is
Right. I appreciate that. But I would say, yeah, in the West overall, secularization, divorcing God from every argument, claiming that we're products of time and chance acting on matter, and we've developed over billions of years. There is no ultimate morality. There is no God. I think that is the foundational problem. I would say that's it. But then all the other things that flow out from that. So therefore, if there is no absolute ultimate morality, then why am I bound to treat someone good? So what they have to do in order to have some semblance of morality, which a lot of these entities do, naturalists, all these people who espouse these various ideologies. You see these social justice advocates, in particularly the secular ones, it becomes a religion to an extent. Being woke is almost like being born again.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's true. Actually, it's a very subtle comparison.
Yes, and if you don't, there's doctrine, there's ideology, there are books to read. In order for you to become enlightened, in order for you to become woke, you have to read certain books. So I think that at the foundation that when you start incorporating all these aspects, and then when it's all said and done, these individuals want to do what they want to do, whatever feels good, and your emotions and your feelings become your God. That's what you worship. That's what you hold up high. So as a result of that, anyone who comes along and tries to say, you know what, living this way in comparison to living this way brings about a lot of problems. So let's not celebrate this. Let's talk about this over here, which is more beneficial, more healthy, better for you overall. People don't want to hear that. They want to live free. So as a result of that, like I said, the sexual revolution, if a father wants to make babies and then turn around and leave, hey, he's criticized. But if a mom wants to abort her children, she's taking care of herself. I mean, it's like the double standard is so ridiculous. You got a deadbeat dad who doesn't want to take care of it. Yeah, a dad that doesn't want to take care of his children is called a deadbeat, and rightfully so. Let me add that in there. First off, because he needs to. But if you have a woman who chooses to abort her children, she's taking care of herself, and she's pro-choice, and she's to be uplifted and celebrated in our society. I'm saying there's such a disconnect and inconsistency there. So when it's all said and done, self becomes elevated as opposing to loving your neighbor. The biblical principle of loving your neighbor, for instance, it's you as an individual, what you want to do is the priority. So as a result of that, why should I care about other people? It's all about me. And you have such an imbalance, man. So you start with the home. That is one of the deeper roots. And like you had just mentioned, when it comes down to the fatherlessness in the home, I was reading a study, because a lot of you always listen to guys like, if you listen to Larry Elder and people like that, they speak a lot on the fatherlessness.
Watch Uncle Tom.
Exactly, excellent documentary.
Yeah.
If you speak on the fatherlessness in the Black community, a lot of people will say, him and a lot of other folks will say that's one of the biggest problems that we've had in our country. And around the world. And there are other people that are saying, well, a father doesn't necessarily have to be, and this was a study that I was reading. A father doesn't necessarily have to be in the home. And the study was stating that Black fathers actually are more active than married single fathers are more active than white or other ethnic groups fathers who are actually in the home. So they're trying to basically squash that argument and saying that, well, saying Black fathers not being in the home, they're more active feeding their kids and asking them questions and spending time with them. But if you read through the study, you find out that it was people always say that personal surveys are some of the worst studies you can have. Like if I ask you, are you a good father? Are you a good man? Most people will say, yeah, I do what I'm supposed to. So they asked individuals whether they were good fathers or not. and how much time they spent with their kids.
Survey, eh?
Exactly. It's flawed from the beginning. At its very foundation, I'm not saying that you can't consider anything that is said, but when you look at the big picture, when you're asking the individual what is he doing, that's a different story. Now you probably would get better information if you talk to the mom, whether it's a baby mom, whether it's a baby mama or whatever. You'll probably get and you talk to both sides, you probably get a more balanced approach. Had the study done that, it would hold more weight in my heart. And I know I went long on this topic, man, but man, when we're dealing with the issue of the family, when we're dealing with the issues of godlessness, when we're dealing with once again, the sexual freedom, this whole drive, minimizing drug laws, and I mean, we can have a debate on that. But everything, these so-called nonviolent crimes and no bail holds, and it's all about just letting people do whatever they want to do. That's the world we're living in. We're living in a totally upside down world where there's no consequence for anything that you do. If you go against the grain, then the grain must change. It's not you. Yeah. The problem ain't you. And particularly if you're Black. If you're Black and if you're shooting up your neighborhood, it ain't because something bad within you and you need to be dealt with. It's because of
systemic racism that's
exactly. Or it's because of the gun. It's a gun or it's systemic racism. It's like, but you put a white person in that same situation. Look at these white folks out there just they can't wait to shoot a Black man down. Man, it's man, I'm telling you, I keep saying it, man, but we're in an upside down world right now. Where what's good is what was once considered bad is good, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And at the heart, when it's at the heart of it all, we just definitely have to open up our minds to a greater level of understanding. As a Christian man, I would point to Jesus first and foremost, as far as help. Because man, I'm telling you, not only did the Lord save my spirit, man, but He's changed my mind. Because man, I was just heading down a crazy path. I was all up in the streets, promiscuous, and thought I was a good dude. But man, just coming in contact with the Lord and me really coming me coming to a position to where I really understood that God has a standard that He wants us to live, and it's not how I feel; it's His righteous standard. Totally changed my mind and my heart, and enabled me to start seeking Him in a way where I was able to honor Him and not live as a constant state of hypocrisy. So, man, that's where we are, bro. We have just walked so far away from God's righteous standards, and we just want to do whatever we want to do. And I just hope my goal is my prayer is that we just wake up as a nation, or as a society in general.
And I agree with you, and I just want to pick apart a couple of things that you said. I mean, there's so much in there that you were.
I was going.
So we went a little bit over. I want to respect your time. Are we okay for time here? Just for a few more minutes here.
Yeah, we're good, man. We're good.
One thing that stuck out to me, and Uncle Tom, I watched the movie. I'm in Canada, so I don't really understand the history of Democrats and conservatives, but I really resonated with the issues of fathers in the home and how they reward single mothers as if it's okay, the welfare state destroying the family unit. I'm trying to understand that a little bit more. One thing he said that was interesting is that the family unit was stronger not only in the 60s before the welfare state came in, but in slavery times, which I thought was insane.
Mind-boggling.
That there were more fathers in the home during that time, which is one of the worst times in American history for Black people, than
No
it is
doubt.
today. Than it is today. And I think it's crazy that they have stats trying to espouse the virtue of being a single parent. If you have to be a single parent and you want to be in your child's life, awesome. But there's nothing like being in the home. I mean,
No
even
question.
Obama had that Father's Day speech where he said the chances of dropping out, the chances of going to jail, the chances of this, that, and the other are higher. And one thing that's interesting is I did a little bit of research into, let's see, where was Jacob Blake's father, George Floyd's father, and I just type in fathers of all these guys, and I noticed that I think one had a stepdad, and most of them it's just mother, 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 mother.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think that a complete family home has a lack of a complete family home might have something to do with the path that some of these guys went on. Something to do with it. There's a lot of factors that play into it.
Of course.
But basically, what I got of what you just said is that we need more love in our relationships, in our life with each other, and we need more responsibility. And we need to take responsibility, whether that's we make a child, we bring a child into the world, we're responsible for that, and responsibility to something greater than us, whether you're Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, whatever it is. We need to have a deference to something greater than ourselves so that we act according to some principles, right? And whether it's the 10 Commandments or something else that you believe in that's higher than you, so that you, as you say, is not self-elevated. So and I want to get that across to people that you need to not just rely on your own understanding, like lean out on your own understanding.
Absolutely.
That's the life we have to live. I know we're getting late in time here. I just want to thank you for coming on and just sharing your knowledge, sharing your wisdom. And I just wanted to ask you one more question. If you were asked to bring a program of diversity to bring races together to organizations, whether they're policing, first responder, or not, would there be a principle that you would teach to try to maybe bridge that gap, a solution? And what would that be?
Man, I know we're going over, so I'm gonna keep it short.
Yeah.
And I'm going to refer back consistently to the biblical principle of love your neighbor as yourself. And there's another verse, and I'm probably going to butcher it a little bit. And I think it's in 1 Corinthians where it says, "Love is patient, love is kind, love holds no record of wrongdoing." Love holds no record of wrongdoing. So basically, it's like love is selfless. It's not centered on you continually, and it doesn't constantly bring up the fact that the wrongs that you did, especially if you have a repentant heart, like and you seek to say, hey, you know what? I realize I acknowledge my mistakes. I want to move on from here. If we as individuals can do that, as people can emphasize that, we would be so much further along. And I think these ideologies like critical theory and all those would have no real power, because we would have to honestly look at ourselves. First and foremost, the old saying of, but by the grace of God go I. I know if my dad my dad was older, considerably older than my mom. So he wasn't a consistently active participant in our daily lives. I mean, he worked long days, and then he would kind of go in his room and chill. But his presence alone was so powerful, so impactful. So when we decided we want to act up too much, all my mom had to do was say, "You want me to tell your dad?" And we straightened up.
That's rough, yeah.
I'm telling you, man, the necessity and the power of a solid, consistent home, the role of fathers, which men in general were constantly being emasculated in society and pushed to the side. Man, if you emphasize those principles, man, we can, when it comes to all the issues that we deal with in our society today, or I would say a good portion of those could be totally done away with if we started really emphasizing those few things.
Well said. I'm going to look up that verse in First Corinthians. Thank you, brother, for your time. We could probably do another one of these one day if you're open to it. Good
Hit me
luck
up, man.
on your talk coming up. And just let's end off by saying, where can people find you and connect with you?
Yeah, I appreciate it. First and foremost, you can reach me at coderedconversations.com. If you appreciate my content, man, check it out. And if I'm an active speaker, so there's an avenue where you can reach me there at the bottom of the primary page, and goes into a little bit more about my background. I put out the most distinct and detailed content on my YouTube channel, Code Red Conversations on YouTube. And you can find me on Facebook under Code Red Conversations, under Eric Muldrow, and also Code Red Conversations on Instagram. So your main social media sources and my website, you can find me. I'm there. I try to be pretty active.
All right. So Code Red Conversations everywhere.
Yes,
thank
sir.
you again, Eric. And I'm blessed to have met you and interviewed you today. So thank you.
Thank you, brother.